Hello and welcome. I am Scrabberlock, and this is Scrabberlock Rants using Power Wash Simulator, and we're going to be cleaning a subway platform with our power washing. And before we do the rant, I'll just take you through a little bit of stuff. It's been quite a while since I've recorded anything. I actually recorded a couple of rants that I wasn't happy with, so I decided not to post them. At the time of this recording, I think I still have one or two more left to post. I decided to do a rant about something that came up yesterday, and so we will do that when we get to it. But first, let's just take a look here. We've got now all of the equipment. We've got our Prime Vista Pro, which is the best item, and we've got all of the attachments for everything. That includes our Prime Vista. It also, we now have all kinds of cleaning liquid. Um, and lots of it. So we can use that whenever we want, but we don't want to be wasteful with it. So we're going to try using our regular stuff first. So we have the subway platform. I'm actually pretty excited about doing this. I like doing horizontal and vertical flat surfaces the best with this game. Doing things that are like all sorts of nooks and crannies in them can be really frustrating. That's what they kind of created as a quote unquote challenge with vehicles like helicopters and stuff. I actually don't enjoy that a lot. So I haven't really recorded any of those, but we are going to do the subway platform here, and let's go ahead and get the signal. And then it's not completely clean, but we're going to just go ahead and do some nice straight lines. I love this when it comes to uh, power washing. This is like almost ASMR for me, especially when I watch like YouTube videos of it. It's awesome. Anyway, so that's our bit about Power Wash Simulator, and now we're going to do a rant. This is going to be a rant about role-playing games and how they're not MMOs, guys. They're not computer games, and you shouldn't treat them as such. So, um, where does this come from? Well, in two places. One was D&D Reddit or D&D Beyond Forum. I can't remember which one. I can never remember. I think it was D&D Beyond Forum, which I still read occasionally, even though I'm not playing D&D right now, and I have no further interest in D&D Beyond. I do occasionally look at the posts, mostly because I have a friend who's still very involved in D&D, but has become very irritated with modern, current day Wizards of the Coast, and so I'll just go in there. He and I kind of both wander in there. He's been banned, and I'm not banned. I can post there, but I don't post there anymore. And we kind of go in there trying to see who can be the first one to find a thread full of dumb crap that we can then post and say, look what these idiots are posting on the D&D Beyond forum in our private Discord. And so I can't remember if he found this or if I found it, but anyway, there was a post about this on the D&D Beyond Discord, and then he also got into it with people on I think it's an OSR, or maybe it's a 5e. It's a 5e Facebook channel. And so the topic of this is going to be builds, and how builds are not really relevant or appropriate in the way that people normally mean the term in tabletop role-playing games. So let's start by the two different threads, one in Facebook, one on D&D Beyond. These threads were both made by newish players who have played very little, if any, actual D&D tabletop. And they're both starting new campaigns with a new GM and a group of players. And what they posted was, critique my build. And here's what I want to do with this build, and what do you guys think of it? And both of them had listed their build by level 20. That is, this character is here's my build for a like level 12 paladin, level 8 warlock, or here's my build for a level 7 cleric, level 13 fighter, right? And they're talking about, what the strengths and weaknesses of this level 20 character multi-classed into 2 or 3 classes is going to be, right? And I looked at this and thought, this is insane. this is what the character is going to be like at 20th level, but you're starting the game at level 1. You don't start at level 20, right? And as I thought about it, I realized this is really very much MMO mentality, right? In massively multiplayer online games like City of Heroes, which up until recently was what I was using for my Let's Plays, right? In a game like City of Heroes, you can get to level 50, which is the max level, just if you want to. There's no one who's going to stop you. And by just playing long enough and grinding your way through the game, you, by yourself, can decide that you want to get to level 50, and you can get there. But that's not the way things work in a tabletop role-playing game, because you're not playing the game solo. You're not playing it by yourself. You can't, by yourself, decide that this campaign is going to go to level 20. And even if all the players want it to go to level 20 when you guys start, there's no guarantee it's ever actually going to get there. We know, as I've mentioned many times before, from all kinds of data, that the average, that Wizards of the Coast has all kinds of data that the average campaign in D&D lasts 6 sessions. 6. That's it. 6 sessions. The average campaign lasts 6 sessions. And most campaigns don't go past level 6. So why in the world are you designing a character that will finally be effective at 20th level with all of these different multi-classing options when you're never going to get there? Right? And again, most campaigns don't go that far. In the real world where you're gaming with other people, right? It may be the case that the DM is for some reason unable to finish, right? Maybe his work schedule changes and he doesn't have time to build adventures. Maybe he and his wife have a baby, or maybe he gets married and his wife says, "No, you can't have Saturday nights for D&D anymore. Saturday nights is going to be our date night." And he agrees to it. Or maybe he better agree to it, or he's going to get into some trouble, or what have you, okay? Maybe 2 of the other players marry each other and move away, and you can't play together anymore, right? Somebody loses their job and can't afford their internet connection to keep Zooming with you guys, or can't afford their D&D Beyond subscription, or whatever. Your players get sick of D&D and want to play some other game. There's so many possible reasons why a campaign will eventually stop. And you really can't expect most games to last to level 20. It takes years to get there. And in fact, on the D&D Beyond forum, one of the people who posted said pretty much this. He said, "I've been playing D&D for 3 years. I GM'd one game and I played in another, and neither campaign is over level 11 yet." Don't build a character around level 20, right? But the question is, why are they building characters around level 20? And I think the answer is the MMO mentality, at least the computer role-playing game, the CRPG mentality, right? Because again, in a computer role-playing game, you decide if you hit max level, right? If you play it long enough, you will eventually hit max level. All you have to do is persevere. You don't need anybody else to agree to it. And the games are basically designed to let you max level, right? Because the point of those games is to get to the end, right? But remember my comments and our discussion in one of the Let's Rants earlier about the finite versus the infinite game. For many people in tabletop role-playing games, the goal of the game is to keep playing, not necessarily to stop or get to the end. And so it may be that the people you're playing with don't even really want to get to level 20. Remember my comment about Professor Dungeon Master and how his group has been playing for years and years. I mean, like 20 years or something, maybe more. And they've never gotten past level like 7 because they all agreed as a group that going past level 7 isn't just really any fun for them. So they've even changed additions and stuff and kept their characters the same levels, and they don't gain XP anymore. Because what they want to do is just play, right? That's what's fun for them. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this mentality is actually really bad for D&D, and I think that a lot of people are kind of poisoned with it. And I don't know if it comes from just video games or MMOs um, or what, but this whole idea of the build and um, that you have to like try and max out your build. And this is the other thing. I don't know about other games, but I can tell you for certain in Dungeons and Dragons, you do not need to optimize your build. You just don't. It's just like things are not on that much of a hair trigger. Your characters, the party is not going to die because your guy has like one lower dex, or because you are a 7-13 multi-class instead of 8-12. Like, nobody's going to die because of that. No battles are going to be lost. No villains are going to escape. No goblins are going to get away from your party or anything like that. So you don't need to have that kind of a perfect uber build in a game like Dungeons and Dragons. You also don't need it, I think, in Savage Worlds. Right? And this is the thing. Computer games are very, very different. Right? Everything is on sort of a hair trigger. If you're not fast enough in a computer game and you don't click on things in exactly the right order, your party can wipe. But tabletop role-playing games don't work that way. They can't work that way because you're not playing on a computer, at least not yet. Although if Wizards of the Coast has their way, you will pretty much exclusively be playing on a computer, but not yet. We are not yet playing tabletop role-playing games on a computer the way you have to in City of Heroes, right? Yes, Foundry and Roll20 and those things are computerized virtual tabletops. But when it's your turn to go, you don't have to click within like 2 seconds or your character dies, right? You can take 20 minutes to decide what you want to do and manually roll things or tell the DM, I need a minute or whatever. It's not like a computer game. There's really nothing similar about them in that regard. And so you don't need this uber maxed out super build to survive a tabletop experience in D&D or Pathfinder or Champions or what have you. You just don't. And even if the game could be that kind of demanding, you still have a game master, and the game master can choose not to make it that demanding if he or she wants, right? And so, I don't know, I think people, I've said this for a while, people are behaving with these role-playing games, they're behaving as if it's a computer game. And they're not taking into account you have a human being running the campaign, right? It's not a computer. It's not a mindless automaton. There's a person at the helm running the game. And so you don't need to be min-maxed because the DM can make the game doable by a non-min-maxed party. And beyond that, the games aren't really designed. I mean, Pathfinder, I guess, maybe is a little bit more like this, but D&D is not really designed such that you need to be min-maxed. It's just really not. And with Champions, everything is so free-form that it's really much more up to the GM. There's nothing about the game Champions that requires your characters to be power gamed or min-maxed. That would only be necessary if your GM is creating villains that are min-maxed, right? And then maybe you would need it. But that's up to the game master. That's not the game system. And, Champions is the same way. You wouldn't go in and say, here's my 500 point character critique my build, you're not starting with 500 points. You're starting with 250. You may never get to 500 points. It's 2 or 3 or 4 experience points per scenario. To get from 250 to 500 points, you need to be in like 75 scenarios. That's going to take forever. Even if each one's only a single night, it will take you 75 sessions. And if they're like mine, where there is 3 sessions per scenario, you're talking about 225 nights. You're playing once a week, it's going to take you years and years and years. And this is the thing, right? In an MMORPG, you can plan out your character for level 50, right? And you're going to know you're going to get there. And you can actually get there pretty fast if you just decide to like game 24/7 for a few days, right? We know that that's certainly true in City of Heroes. But in D&D, you can't do that. Right? The other players aren't going to like play with you for 3 straight weeks every single night until 4 a.m. just because you want to level up. You're still only going to be playing once every week or every 2 weeks or every month or however long you guys do it. And so, yeah, you can't approach these games the way you would approach an MMO, and you shouldn't therefore approach your build the way you would approach the build of an MMO character. So how should you approach your character in a role-playing game? Well, whatever level you're starting at, that's your build. You're starting at level 1, you're building a level 1 character. Now, I'm not saying you can't plan what's going to happen in the future. That's okay, that's fine. My best friend does that. But what you don't want to do is build a character that won't even be effective until you get all of your synergistic abilities in by level, like, 17. Because the odds very strongly are that you're never going to get to level 17. And then you've got a character that may be much weaker than normal at the lower levels because the stuff doesn't really work until you get it synergistically combined, right? And it all works together, right? This feat that you took at level 4 is utterly useless until you take the next feat at level 8 and then the third feat at level 12. And then the feats are going to work really well together. Well, you're never going to get to level 12. The statistics indicate you'll probably never see it. If you do see it, you'll see it for a very short period of time, and still most of your character's life was spent not optimized. So that's the thing. If you're going to optimize for level 20, your character will never be optimized until then, and therefore may never be optimized. So there's really no point to doing that. You're much better off taking whatever you need for the current level. If you want to optimize, optimize for the level you are now. You're starting at level 3, optimize for level 3. You're starting at level 1, optimize for level 1. And then when you gain a level, optimize for level 2. That's the best way to do it, because then your character is working at every single level. Right, and you're not waiting to become a viable character someday. Right, you're viable now, and you stay viable the whole time. That, to me, is the best way to do it. And I think that we see an awful lot of this on the forums and the Reddits and apparently this Facebook group, where players they're just assuming when they start a campaign that it's going to go to level 20. And I think most of them have no real appreciation for the magnitude of that, for how long that takes to get from level 1 to level 20 using the experience points guidelines in the book. I mean, yes, some GMs will let you level up, let's say, once per session. Right, I'm doing that in my Deadlands game right now. They gain 1 advance. They don't have levels in Savage Worlds, but they gain an advance each session. At the end of each session, I say, okay, guys, you can advance before the next session. Right, and the reason is it's a temporary campaign. It's short term. I want to let them get to seasoned or maybe veteran rank before we finish, so they can get a sense of how their characters play at different ranks. Actually, I think it's much too fast they've had like one combat and 3 very short sessions, and they're almost done with the novice rank. I mean, I wouldn't normally advance characters that way, but even if you do that, 1 to 20 is going to take a minimum of 20 sessions, which is 20 weeks if you're playing weekly. If you're playing every other week, it's 40 weeks. It's almost a year. Assuming there are going to be some breaks for holidays or people can't play 1 week or whatever, you're looking at 6 months if you're playing weekly to a year. That's minimum. That's if you advance once a session. If you use actual experience points or story-based leveling where you advance at story milestone points, well, sometimes you're not going to hit a milestone in that session. And if you're doing experience-based leveling, man, it takes a lot of XP once you get past level 10 or so. And yeah, there's a huge increase, in like an exponential increase in the XP needed. The number of encounters you need goes from 3 or 4 to like a dozen or so to like 60 encounters or 50 or something like that to gain a single level. Well, even if I'm off by half, maybe you need 30 encounters. You can only play maybe 2 or 3 encounters a session. You're looking at 10 sessions for 1 level, right? In the mid levels, like level 10, 11, 12, it's going to take you probably, by experience, 100 sessions. That's 2 years playing every week. 4 years playing bi-weekly. How many game groups play the same campaign for 4 years? It's extremely unlikely. It's very hard to keep a game group together like that for that long a period of time. It's very, very difficult to do, and only a handful of game groups do it, right? Probably 95% of them never succeed at it, okay? And so to assume your group is going to be successful where almost no other groups are, when you personally have never played D&D before, that is quite the wild assumption. You know, a friend of mine said, this is my colleague at work said, I wonder if it's because of Critical Role. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, if you think about what happened with the pattern of Critical Role success, it seems pretty clear that one of the things that made Critical Role so successful was the pandemic, right? They had, I don't know, something like 90 episodes in the can when the pandemic hit, right? I think they stopped filming for a while, but then they started up again, right? And then they went to like, I don't know, it was episode 150 or something, right? Is this side clean? Let's see, it's sort of. So he said what happened, what he thinks happened, is a lot of people started watching Critical Role during the pandemic because they had nothing better to do. I'm sure that's part of why my best friend watched it so fast. Like he was watching multiple episodes a week, right? And he said most people wouldn't. That's 4 hours an episode, and most people would not have time to watch. Maybe a lot of people wouldn't even have time to watch 1 episode a week, let alone multiple. But because the pandemic was going and everybody was working from home and they were saving hours a week on the commute, right? I know I certainly did. My commute, and I have a pretty good one, but my commute is about 20, 25 minutes each way, so it's 50 minutes a day, right? So if I don't commute all week, that's 250 minutes of my life that I'm saving. I could easily watch an episode of Critical Role just in that amount of time, right? And so what he was saying is, so people watch Critical Role. They didn't start the day it started. They started when it was 90 episodes in, and they mainlined it, and they watched 2 and 3 and 4 episodes a week. So yeah, Critical Role got to, I don't know, level 16 or so. But he said because they weren't watching it weekly, the most of the audience, right? They were watching the recorded episodes during the pandemic, and they watched like the whole series in a year. They don't realize how long these guys were doing it, right? They were playing for like 3 years or something, and it doesn't feel that way when you're watching it as a recorded episodes 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, because you're getting like a month of play in a week, right? And so he said, I think that some folks who maybe were like watching Critical Role as their entree into D&D and saw those characters get to this really high level, and it seemed, oh, well, they did it pretty quickly, right? You don't realize how long it took in terms of real life to get to that level, because it because it happened faster for you as someone who was um, watching multiple episodes a week, right? So instead of it taking 3 or 4 years, however long it took them to actually do that campaign in real life, to you it only took them 6 months or a year. And so it's hard to fathom, and if you've never played a role-playing game yourself, right, before doing this, right, it's really hard to fathom how slow and how long it takes to run have a role-playing game go through a full campaign like that, right? I mean, most people just don't get their champions characters from 250 to 500 points. My group, I think in my 2-year campaign, they went from 250 to close to 400, so they gained about 150 XP. And it took us 2 years playing 3 sessions a week, right? There were 30 scenarios. Some were on the order of 3 to 4 sessions a scenario. I want to say we probably played around 100, 110 sessions. That is a really long time. And only the 2 characters who were on the team for the entire 2 years got to 400 points. Nobody else did, because nobody was in it for that long. Well, the one guy got to 400, but he started higher because he came in the second year, so I gave him like 50 points of hero bonus. But yeah, it's really hard to get to that high of a power level in champions if you start at 250 points, because it just takes a long time. And that's why you don't want to envision your character as the 400 point character you will eventually be, or the 20th level character you will eventually be. You want to envision your character as a 250 point or a level 1 character, and then go from there. I do want to say, I know there's oil patches in there. I'm going to come back and clean them up later rather than trying to play with it. After we get most of this done, I'll go back, and I don't know if you'll see it because I feel like we're winding down to the end of this rant, but I'll just go back and work on it separately. So yeah, I mean, so I don't know. Is it because people have watching these streams, whether it's Colville's Dusk and you watch all those episodes in one big main line, just all in one big swoop, or Critical Role and you're watching those all in one big fell swoop, or whether it's MMOs, games like City of Heroes and World of Warcraft, where you can automatically basically ensure that you're going to get to max level by just grinding through the game. I don't know what it is that makes people think that they're going to get to max level, that it's going to be trivial to do that, and that they have to build their character for max level. But my advice is not to do that, right? I'm not saying you can't have a plan, right? But I also think, especially for people who are new, right? If you haven't played D&D or Champions or whatever, you're new, or not only just new, but you haven't played this class before, it can be very, very difficult to picture how a character in a game you haven't played, or how a character who's a class you haven't played is going to play. And it's often a mistake to try and to try and plan out what you're going to do all the way to level 20 or to legendary rank in Savage Worlds or to 400 points in Champions without seeing how the character actually plays in the game first, getting a sense of how things work and what the character's strengths and weaknesses are as you're playing it. And then you go, I thought this was going to work really well, but as I've tried it, I'm not super happy with it. Maybe I want to try something else, right? This happens to me all the time when I think something is going to work, and then I play it out a little bit in the game and find out, actually, this isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. You can see it a little bit in City of Heroes, where I picked a power, and then I was like, this power isn't that great. So, like, if you go back and look at my last set of rants, where I was using the Stalker, right, and she got a Confuse, it doesn't work that great, right? It works sometimes. Like, first of all, even with 2 hit buffs on it, about a quarter of the time she misses, right? So she doesn't even hit. So about 25% of the time she fires that thing off and it misses. And then, even when it hits, sometimes it just doesn't work and they ignore it, right? I don't know, they're resistant to it or whatever. And that's like another 25%. So it's like, it's only going to work like 50% of the time. So I thought, oh, Confusion is great, I'll use it a lot. And in the end, I hardly used it. Right? And I don't regret getting it because there really aren't any other powers I would have gotten instead. But yeah, I could easily see regretting having that power because it just doesn't seem as effective as a lot of other options might be. Right? Placate is a better option in my opinion most of the time than using that Confuse. It just doesn't work that great. So, but you won't know that until you start to play and you see how it works in combat, and then you realize, well, the way I was picturing that it would work isn't actually working at all, and I'm not a fan of this power, so maybe I don't want it anymore, or maybe I shouldn't have gotten it. So, it's really, really hard to know what is your character going to be like in 20 levels. You've got to play it a little bit first. So if you want to plan things out so that you don't waste like feat options or choose the wrong ASI, I mean, I guess sure, go ahead. But I would argue that you're also, by planning it out ahead like that, when you've never played the character and maybe never played the game and you're just trying to statistically min-max, there's a very high risk that you're going to end up with a character that you don't even enjoy playing because you planned out the character based on the statistics on some website or in D&D Beyond or whatever, savage.us, and what the numbers say instead of how the character actually plays. And so my advice to everyone is to kind of relax. Don't be so obsessed with maxing everything out to the nth degree, and instead just sort of let things happen naturally, right? Play the character and see what aspects of it you like and build into those aspects. Right? There's such a thing as too much planning. And I've tried to say this to my best friend. We're playing Deadlands, Savage Worlds. He's never played Savage Worlds. Okay. Doesn't know anything about it. Right? And as I may have mentioned before, my players know so little about Savage Worlds that one of them said, I took my advance, but I didn't see where I could gain hit points. And you don't gain hit points in Savage Worlds, right? It's a totally new game. So I said to him, why are you planning it out like this? Well, he just likes to. Okay, so I look at his plan. And he's playing a character who's got shooting. She's a gunslinger. Heck, she's going to be a hex slinger. Hexslinger huckster. Okay, that's fine. But I look at his plan. Because he wrote it all out. And he put it in Foundry. And his character all the way to heroic, the end of heroic rank, doesn't have any fighting. Her fighting is D4 minus 2, right? She does not have the fighting skill. You say, okay, she's a gunslinger. Yeah, but you have to be careful with fighting and not taking any of it, because in Savage Worlds, whether you get hit or not depends on your parry in melee, right? In range attacks, the target number is always 4, but in melee combat, the target number is your parry, which is half of your d6 in fighting. If you have no fighting, that's 0 plus 2. And the enemy has to roll your parry or higher to hit you in melee. So here's the problem. If you only have a 2 parry, which is what she has, anything but a 1 is going to hit you. Which means even something that's just got a measly d6 in fighting. So let's get our liquid cleaner here, multi-purpose. Anything that is a d6, even just a measly d6 in fighting, is going to have a 5 in 6 chance of hitting you. Like I tried to explain, essentially the only way you're going to be missed is if something crit fails against you. Right? So now his character is going to get hit by almost every single melee attack that comes at her. And to make matters worse, this is a horror setting, so there are lots of monsters, lots of critters, as they call them, in Deadlands, that are melee primary or melee only, right? And so he planned this all out, but he's never really seen the enemies, what you're going to face. Many of them are melee based. They have can have very dangerous melee attacks. They fought one combat so far against schools. They were all melee, right? So if you plan it all out the way he does, the way he has, whoops, and you haven't, if you plan it all out the way he has, and you haven't played the game much, there's a very, very high risk that you're going to plan it out in a way that's not going to be effective, even when you're trying to be all effective in min-maxy. Right? So let's say he plays this character for 3 or 4 sessions more and realizes he keeps getting absolutely whomped in melee. Well, he's going to have to change his plan anyway if he's going to give himself some fighting, because it's the only way to get yourself some parry against melee attacks. You got to have fighting, right? And so yeah, I mean, if you didn't plan it out, you could just take fighting as soon as you see this is a problem, and it doesn't screw with your plan, because there is no plan, right? So I guess I'm not really saying you should never plan anything out, but what I am saying is trying to plan your character out to level 20 is, in my view, a mistake. I think that it means that your character, it means that you're going to struggle with the need to make adjustments as you come to grips with the fact that you didn't understand all the mechanics before you started this character, right? And now that you understand the mechanics, you're going to have a different view of just exactly what's the most interesting and effective way to do the character. Now you could say, okay, well, what if I already know all the rules of D&D and it's not a problem? Well, yeah, sure, you can go ahead and, if you know all the rules, sure, fine. But these people who were making these posts, these are new players asking for help with designing characters that they think they're going to be able to get to 20th level in a campaign that just started with them and a bunch of new players and a new DM. You know what I mean? Like, what are the odds? And I said to this friend of mine, what they're doing is the equivalent of somebody who went out and bought a lottery ticket and then went onto a financial website and started asking financial advisors about how to invest their lottery winnings that they're going to get tomorrow when the drawing is held. Right? You have about as much chance starting out in a new campaign with a bunch of other new players and a new DM. You have about as much chance of getting your character to level 20, at least playing a natural campaign and not just starting at level 20, as you have of winning the lottery, which is to say none. And so instead of trying to figure out how you're going to invest that lottery money, why don't you instead figure out, what am I going to get for lunch tomorrow with the money I actually have? Right? And same thing with your D&D character. Instead of trying to figure out what you're going to do at level 20, right, to make your character uber maxed out, why don't you just figure out how to play your character at level 1 first? And then at level 2, and then at level 3, and as you level up, you'll slowly get the hang of the character, and you'll become better as a player, which is going to give you a really good idea of the best way to play and build this character, right? And build into the character rather than trying to design the character a priori, as we would call it in science, or in Latin, I guess, because it's Latin. So, folks, why don't you let me know how you feel about this? I'm always open for comments. Is there a good reason why you think people should make a level 20 build and try to min-max their paladin, sorcerer, warlock, right, at level 20? Or do you agree with me that, look, just start at level 1, design a good level 1 character, and go from there? Because I think that by trying to design a level 20 character, I mean, I know this happens with my best friend. He is constantly frustrated by the fact that he never gets his characters to the level he planned on, right? It frustrates him to no end that, he's never gotten a character past like level 15. And even in our Savage Worlds game, he's trying to, he's got it all planned out, even though, as far as I know, we're not really supposed to be playing that long, right? The campaign that I created is fairly short, and it's fairly short. Well, I didn't create it. It's Coffin Rock, but we got maybe 3 or 4 more sessions to go, and then it's going to stop. So even leveling up like 1 advance per session, right? Even doing that is trying to get down here. Am I not going to be able to get this side here? Here we go. There we go. Even leveling up once per session is not going to get him to heroic rank, because that's going to take like 8 more sessions. We're never going to get there. And I was talking to this other friend of mine, and I said, he's supposed to be prepping his D&D campaign, but I have the feeling that he's not going to have any interest in prepping it until he gets his character to legendary rank in Savage Worlds. And the thing is, I don't know if the other players want to play that much. I know the one player said that although Deadlands is cool, the idea of not playing D&D again makes her sad. So I don't want to make her sad. That means that she wants to play some D&D, right? And so we have to make her happy too. So I don't know if the other players want to play 16 sessions of Deadlands. I mean, one of the reasons I picked a fairly short campaign, and I tried to tell him this. One of the reasons I made a fairly short campaign was because I didn't know if people were going to enjoy Deadlands. Like this is a new game. I don't know if you guys are going to like it. So I said let's not do. I showed them I have long campaigns like the horror at Headstone Hill that probably take months to run. But I said I don't want to start with that because what if you guys hate it? What if you guys don't like the system of Savage Worlds or the world of Deadlands? Right? They might say we like Savage Worlds, but actually we don't really like the Weird West that much. Can we do something else like East Texas University? Right? And so yeah, folks, I would say that um, try not to focus on the end point. Think of your character as a journey. You're in a position, you want to know where your next couple of steps are, but like if you're driving from New York to LA, you gotta know where you're going and that you're going to take certain set of highways to get there. You might plan that out vaguely, but what you're focused on when you're driving is where's the next exit? How far to the next exit? Your GPS doesn't tell you the exit you're going to take when you get to LA. It tells you first take the exit 20 miles from now. And when you get there, it says now go 40 miles and get onto this highway. And then when you get there, it says now you go 160 miles and get onto this highway. Right? It's giving you carefully the next step. And if you make a wrong turn or you have to take a detour, it can adjust your path to still get you to your destination using a different road. And I think we should think about building and running our role-playing game characters in much the same way. Yes, you're trying to get to LA and you need to know which highway main routes, Route 40 or whatever you're going to take to get there. But you also want to make sure that you don't plan a route that's so inflexible that when you get into a traffic jam or there's construction on the road or a blocked highway or tornadoes are coming or whatever, that you can't sidetrack onto a better road that more suits your trajectory and will get you to your final destination more effectively, right? So think of the character as a journey, and just like with your GPS, pay attention to the current position and the next couple of turns, the next couple of positions. Don't worry about level 20 when you're level 1. Your character might not live to get there. You might decide you don't want to play the character after 7 levels. How do you know you're going to like it? Unless you've already played a Paladin, Warlock, Sorcerer, how do you know you're even going to enjoy playing this character? I thought I was going to enjoy a Blade Singer, and I ended up not liking it at all. Okay? And so I didn't know that was going to happen until I started playing the Blade Singer and found that I didn't really like it. I thought it sounded awesome. It sounded kind of like a blapper in, a sort of a blaster scrapper in City of Heroes, which is kind of cool. It sounded interesting. I liked the idea of having a melee wizard instead of a vulnerable stand in the back of the room type, in the back of the party type wizard. But in actual play, I found out I didn't really like it for a whole variety of reasons that we don't need to get into. But my point is that you can't always picture whether you're going to enjoy the play. In Matt Colville's Chain of Acheron game, one of the characters, this is spoilers now, one of the characters that dies early on is Phil's character, who's, I can't remember his name. Is it Nails? No, I can't remember his name. But he's basically a monk, right? He's like a boxer. He's a pugilist. And instead of ki, he has grit. And Phil played him for a while. He actually became the leader of the chain after the first leader died. And a few episodes in, the character was killed. And he was killed in Colvillian fashion where, his body was disintegrated and there was nothing left. And I remember Colville saying that is code to his players that this character is not to be resurrected. That the player of the character doesn't want their character to come back. Don't try to resurrect him. So he said, my players, he explained to the audience so that we would know, but he said all of my players knew when I described that, all that was left of him was his hat or whatever, they knew what that meant. That meant no, don't attempt to resurrect this guy. He doesn't want to come back. Right? Phil had asked to kill off that character and replace him. Why? Because he didn't like how it played. And what he said was, Phil had played a warlock in the previous campaign, and warlocks, I guess, don't get the type of spell options. I don't know a lot about them because I've never played one and I didn't have one in my campaign. But they don't get the variety of spells that the other spellcasting classes get. And a lot of times warlocks are just doing Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, which is one of their cantrips, over and over again. And so it's kind of mindless, and you're just doing the same attack over and over again. And Phil felt that with the pugilist, it was the same thing. It was just punch every time. Punch, 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 punch. And he wanted something with a little more variety to it. So I think he switched to a Battlemaster fighter, a Githyanki Battlemaster fighter, who was able to do all these cool maneuvers. And that's really what he wanted. He thought it was more tactical, right? So now here's a very experienced player playing a custom class that Matt Colville made up for him, that they both thought he would enjoy playing. And after like one level, he was like, yeah, I don't really enjoy this game, this gameplay. Can I switch? And so this is what I'm saying. You can't even necessarily be sure that you're going to love the character that you've designed, right? Colville thought that Phil would like it. Phil thought Phil would like it. And after he played it for, 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, he said, you know what, I'm not a fan. Can I play a different character? Right? And he switched to a plain old fighter, okay? A Battlemaster fighter. So, this is my point. How do you know whether you're going to like this character enough to play it to level 20 if you've never done it before? I mean, the only way you could know is if you've actually played a Paladin, Warlock, Sorcerer, or whatever it is, to level 20 before and enjoyed it. And if you've done that, ignore what I'm saying. Go ahead and make your plan. But almost nobody who's already done it once is asking for build advice to do it. Right? Because if you've done it already, you don't need the build advice. You already know how to do it. Right? It's like me playing. I don't need any advice to play a martial arts super reflex scrapper in City of Heroes. I played like 4 of them to level 50 at this point, and I know exactly when to take powers and exactly what powers I want to take and in what order and how I want to slot them and what enhancements I want to put in each slot. And it's like literally mindless for me now. I don't need any help with that, and I wouldn't be looking for any build guides, right? But if you're playing something you've never played before, how do you know if you're going to like it? To all the way to level 20. And it's not like an MMO where you have alts. This is the only character you're playing in that D&D game, and it's probably the only D&D game you're in. So if you don't like it, it's going to be a long road to level 20. And if you don't like how it plays in the interim levels, it's going to be a long road to level 18 or whenever it finally comes into its own. This is in City of Heroes where you can mine the Architect. This is D&D, and the only way to level up is to go through all the earlier levels, right? Unless your DM is going to allow you to start at a higher level, the only way to do it is to do it, guys. And so you want something you're going to enjoy from level 1 through level 20, not just at level 20. Because otherwise you're going to be in it for literally years in most cases. And are you even going to be able to enjoy it? Or are you going to be miserable that whole time? So, my advice to you is focus on the journey, not the end point. And don't worry about what you're going to be like at level 20. Worry about what you're going to be like at level 2 first. And I think we'll stop there. There is a lot to clean. But hey, we made a dent. Look at this. It's looking pretty good on this side here. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes. Sorry, no. This hasn't been City of Heroes. This has been Power Wash Simulator. Let's rant with Scrapper.